is all about accompanying. Um, Church pianists have kind of changed their responsibilities a little bit over the last few years. And when I was growing up playing in church, it really was just me playing and playing with possibly an organist. Nowadays, church pianists are being called upon to play with rhythm sections and play with bands and things like that, which is a lot of fun, but it could be something that not everyone is used to, although, we're getting more and more used to it. I grew up playing a lot of jazz. I think I mentioned to the folks yesterday in my jazz arranging, or sorry, in my piano arranging class, that I have a little bit of a jazz background. And so, with the advent of guitars and basses and all that kind of stuff coming into worship, I felt, right at home because of all of my background playing with bands throughout high school and college. But I realized that for some folks, that's not part of their comfort zone. And so, what I want to do with this session is to talk to you a little bit about what some of the styles of playing are when you're playing with, for lack of a better word, with a rhythm section. Most of the time, rhythm section is a term that we really use more in the jazz world, I think, maybe than necessarily in the Christian world. Um, but I want to talk to you a little bit about what are some of the things you can do as a pianist while you're playing with a band in a worship service, and what some of the things that the right hand does, and what some of the things that the left hand does. I hope that you're able this time to see the handout that I have prepared for you. It's got some excerpts on it from a lot of different choral pieces, and this isn't a choral accompanying session, but I want to show you a little bit of well, what I'm going to teach is I'm going to show you from some of these choral arrangements, some of these pieces that have particular patterns of accompaniment, and I'm going to show you how you might use those within the context of playing with a bass and drums and playing with a rhythm session at your church on Sunday morning. So if you have that, I'll get you to go ahead and open up your packet, and we'll take a look at the very first one. It's called Hymn Style. I'm feeling a little bit better today, by the way. Yesterday was rough. I'm telling you. I was foggy-headed, and it's just by the grace of God that I get through that piano arranging session. I don't know what in the world's going on. Today I'm still a little under the weather, but a whole lot better than I have been. So hopefully we'll be able to stay together, and if you have your handout there in front of you, we'll be able to make sense of this. So the very first thing that I've put in there is hymn style. Hymn style. And what you're looking at in that handout is the first couple of pages of a concertato arrangement that I did with my good friend and former boss when I worked for Hal Leonard, Joseph Martin. And so this is an arrangement that we did of To God Be the Glory. Now, if you take a look, you can skip through the first page. That's kind of more choral. But if you look at the second page, right where the hymn comes in at measure 20, you'll see that basically the hymn style of piano playing, which I know all of you, I'm sure, do very well. And this is the most common type of accompaniment, and that's why I'm putting this here at the beginning, and we're going to move beyond it here quickly. But hymn style of piano playing is basically copying the four parts out of the hymn book, okay? You can do that with a rhythm section. It works out usually just fine, as long as your bass player and guitarists have chords, right? More often than not, when you're playing piano or when you're accompanying with a rhythm section, most likely they're going to simplify chords. Hymns are notorious for having chord changes that happen every beat, right? Sometimes literally every beat. This particular piece doesn't, but a lot of, I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head. Of course I can't, but For All the Saints or something like that, where you have literally chord changes every beat. That's not always very conducive to rhythm section style. So a lot of times what your rhythm section will want to do is to simplify and take out some of those chord changes and just get the bare bones chords that are needed to make the hymn work. A lot of you are probably on Song Select. If you know Song Select, that's where I get my music for Sunday morning. I'm a worship pastor at our church here in Bastrop. Um, and sorry, that's Michael Smith texting with me. He's the administrator there. Um, so they a lot of times I'll get my music from Song Select, and when you download music from Song Select, a lot of times they'll give you the traditional, hymn. If you're playing a hymn, you can get hymns from there too, and it'll have all these chords left and right, a couple of chords a measure, sometimes every beat. And then sometimes it'll give you a simplified version too, which, okay, guys, we're just going to play an E major chord for 2 bars, which your rhythm section tends to maybe like a little bit more. However, if you are playing hymn style piano, this does work really, really well with the rhythm section, provided, as I said a few minutes ago, that your guitarist and your bass player, that they have the chord changes in front of them. If your bass player and guitarist, if they're music readers, they might be able to read that. The bass player could read it straight out of the hymn book. More often than not, guitarists will need to have some kind of chord sheet in front of them. But what happens, if you look at page 2, what happens is you're basically following along with the 4-part harmony. And what you end up doing is kind of putting in what we call in classical theory little embellishments, little passing tones here or there. And you can see what I'm talking about. I'm going to play measure 20. This is the accompaniment on page 2 of my handout for To God Be the Glory. So you'll see that right at the beginning, it's just following the voice notes totally, right? There's nothing unusual. Now, right here, you can see what I've done right there. I know this is really simple. That's why we're starting with this. But rather than just go from the melody A down to the D and then back up to the A, I put in a little bitty fill there, right? Right, that little guy right there, you heard that. And then here's another little fill, right, that happens on the downbeat of measure 23. And then it's back to the parts. And then take a look at measure 25, I think that is. You can see that what the right hand of the piano is doing is basically you've got your melody, world that he, and I'm just putting in little passing tones in between the melody, right? The bass line is world that he, and I'm putting in little bass line passing tones there too. Right, and then moving into bar 26, and then 27, here's some empty space, so I'm going to fill this up with a little bitty line. Most of the time, when you're creating these fills, these fill material, when you're doing hymn work, most of it is diatonic. Now, what do I mean by diatonic? That's a word I might have used yesterday. By diatonic, what I mean is you're going to be using melodic tones and material that are part of the key. This is in the key of G major, so I'm going to be using a lot of melodic material that's drawn from the scale of G major, right? G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, and G. In fact, I think all the little fills that I created in here, all these little scale lines and things like that, they're all figurations derived from G major, the scale of G major. So I won't spend any more time with this because I suspect this is what we've all seen and done a good bit. That's hymn playing. Hymn style playing. Depending on what kind of church you are in, and I'm in Austin, Texas, and I've spent most of my life in the South, and so I have had many opportunities to play Southern gospel piano. Okay, and so I put in this little piece here by Brian Powell that can kind of demonstrate Southern gospel piano playing really at its simplest. And what basically it is, it's what we call an oompa accompaniment. O-O-M hyphen pa, oompa. really scientific name for that, isn't it? Well, it's derived from the way the left hand is working in coordination with the right, right? The left hand's playing a bass note, and the right hand is playing just a single chord, okay? And so you create this pa, pa kind of a style. Now, if you are playing this solo, in other words, if you don't have a bass player or a drummer, if it's just you in the congregation, then the typical Southern gospel style is that you're rotating in your left hand with the bass, the root of whatever chord you're on, the root rotating with the fifth. So if you look at my bar 3 on Let the Walk of Faith Begin, this is page 3, and I want you to look at bar 3. You can see that the left hand has, we're in the key of F, so it has the F, which is the root, and it's alternating with the fifth, the C, and then back to the F, and then it goes into D minor. So I've got the root on the downbeat, D minor, D is the root, and then A is the fifth. So it's always this alternation of root going with fifth, and then it's coordinating that with offbeat chords, right? So you get this, right? Now, here's the thing about this style. Less is more. I know that we've all heard Southern gospel pianists, if you have ever listened to quartet singing or anything like that. Again, in the South, I've heard quite a bit of it. But we think of these incredible Southern gospel pianists like Roger Bennett and Anthony Berger. Both of those guys have since gone on to be with the Lord. Gerald Wolfe, who's played with the Cathedral Quartet, and there's so many wonderful pianists that are out there, and they just, their fingers are working and they're doing all these flashy licks, just going a mile a minute. And we want to emulate that. But the truth is, it's not necessary. Southern gospel at its root is actually a very simple style. You're really replicating a rhythm section. And I'm talking right now about if it's just you at the piano and not with bass and drums. And so you can put in little fancy licks and things like that. But the big thing is you're replicating a rhythm section, right? And it's got to be crisp. It's got to be light. If I were going to accompany When We All Get to Heaven, right? That's a good Southern gospel song. If I were accompanying this for my congregation, I probably would do something maybe just as simple. I mean, that's it. When we all get to heaven, what a day of rejoicing that will be. When we all... So I put in a little bass line right there. But it's very crisp and very light and very bare bones, and that's what you want with this. Now, what happens if you're accompanying this and you have a bass player? That creates a little bit of a problem, because unless you coordinate with your bass player, if you kind of have a bass line going, right, and your bass player also is chugging away on a bass line, that's going to be a recipe really for disaster, okay? In fact, one of the hardest things to do for a church pianist that is not used to playing with a rhythm section is getting their left hand to quiet down and to not feel like you've got to play all those big roots down there, because we're so used to filling up the lower end of the piano with those big roots when we accompany hymns and all that. Well, if you're playing with a rhythm section, the bass is already down there doing that, and so you don't really want to do that because you get in his or her way. So what would we do in Southern gospel? You know what? One thing that we could do is just let the left hand rest. And if you've got a bass player that's playing and, they were doing When We All Get to Heaven, the only thing, I might give my left hand a rest and I just let my right hand be playing on offbeats. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Really, that's okay. A lot of times what you'll see Southern gospel pianists do is that they'll let their left hand take the offbeats and the right hand might play the melody. So you get something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. right? Kind of hard. It's not hard to do. It's just different. And so in this case, I know that my bass is already taken care of. And so I can, just let my left hand play those little off beats and let my right hand, play the melody or play chords, do whatever it, wants to do, as long as it's simple and crisp. That's what happens if you're playing with a rhythm section. If you're not playing with a rhythm section, if it's just you, then you can go ahead and put that left hand bass in there and just oompa, oompa, oompa away. If you're wanting to learn or if you want to see some great places where you can kind of learn some of this style, check out choral writing by folks like Mark Hayes, by Mary McDonald, Joel Rainey. Those folks, goodness, Joel came from Alabama. Mary is a native Tennessean, and they both play that style so well. They've grown up with it. And so it's really a good place to kind of, find an arrangement that Mary McDonald has done of I'll Fly Away or, what have you. And then just kind of sit there and see, okay, what's she doing and what can I copy? The fifth page of your handout is our third little accompaniment style that I want to look at. I think that Don Bisig, if you know the choral writer Don Bisig, I think that he really exemplifies this style of writing so well. I don't know if Don would call it this. I call it guitar style writing, okay? And I'll tell you why I say that. If you look on page 6, this is a little extraction from a song he wrote called Come to Me. And if you look on page 6 at measure 14, if I can play some of that accompaniment for you, just listen to what the piano sounds like at bar 14. Right, okay? It's very guitar-like. You can almost kind of, in fact, I've got a keyboard here in front of me. If I could turn it on a guitar patch and I were to play this, you would see what I mean. Very guitar style. Now, again, this is just a great way of accompanying ballads, particularly if you're with a rhythm section. Now, again, if you're with a rhythm section with a praise band and the bass player's playing those roots or the bass notes, you're not going to want to get in his way too much or her way too much. So you might, look at bar 14 for me for a minute. I might, if a bass player were playing with me, I might omit the roots and I might just do something like this: 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So my left hand is playing the note on the offbeat, but my right hand is playing the part as written. And I know that sounds very thin just with me at the piano, but you have to understand that, once you get your piano amplified and you've got the drums there and the bass, I mean, it's a pretty good full sound. So how do you practice this, by the way? I'm assuming that most of the folks in this session probably have a good working knowledge of theory. I'm assuming that I could say, okay, if I were to randomly pick someone in this session, come to the piano and play an A minor chord, and you could find it pretty quick. Or I could say, hey, play a D major chord with F sharp in the bass, and you could find it pretty quick. If you cannot do that yet, then that is something that would be really, really beneficial for you to do. And I'll tell you how you can make exercises out of little things like this. If we look at bar 14 again, okay, look at the first 2 beats of bar 14. That's a D major chord, okay, on beats 1 and 2. And then if we go to beats 3 and 4 of bar 14, we see that is an A major chord in what we call first inversion. First inversion because the third of the chord, which is C sharp, is in the bass. Then it looks like Don's going to a B minor chord on the first couple of beats of measure 15. And then he's going to a D chord in what we call second inversion on the back half of 15. Well, there's a whole lot of harmonic material there. And so one excellent way that you can practice this style of accompanying is to find some kind of harmonic segment. Take this, take it from, some praise and worship song that your church plays, and practice it through all the keys. Okay? So in other words, it's in the key of D. Okay? What if I move it up a half step and put it in E flat? What if I move it up another half step and put that in E? Right? You get the idea. You could put it in F. Right? You just run it through all 12 keys, okay? And practice it through all 12 keys. And that really starts to develop your dexterity with playing in all sorts of different keys. The other thing too, which if you've played with rhythm section folks before, this key would be okay. But you know that guitarists love keys like D and E and A and G, C, particularly E and A. They really, it's more difficult. They have to they capo usually. They'll pull out a capo if they get into a key like D flat major, or G flat major or something like that. Well, a lot of hymns are written in A flat and E flat. So in order to help them out, you might have to, instead of playing it in E flat, you might have to transpose that hymn into E, right? Which your guitarist and bass player will thank you for. Contemporary Christian music, for the most part, is written in guitar-friendly keys because it comes from that musical landscape, right? That musical genre. But a lot of times when we're trying to put hymns in front of our folks, we might need to do some judicious transposing to help them. Okay, that's guitar style. Now, something really kind of related, I feel like, to guitar style is, what I called it for the purposes of this handout, eighth note style. Eighth note style. Again, this is really, really great accompanying style when you're with the rhythm section. It doesn't always work so well when you're by yourself, because if you're by yourself, if it's just you and you're accompanying your congregation, unless it's a song that they really know, most congregations are going to need a little bit more help from you to drive them. However, when you're playing with a band, well, you've got the drums there, they're providing the beat. You've got, possibly a guitarist who's, providing some rhythmic motion. And that's what you're doing here. You're just adding rhythmic motion without getting in anyone's way. And so if you take a look at the bottom of page 7, okay, this is the bottom of page 7, a wonderful song. By the way, I'll plug this song. If you don't know it, it's Joseph Martin's Sing to Me. I had the privilege of orchestrating it for Joe several years ago before the pandemic hit, and a wonderful song. If you take a look at bar 13, you'll see that Joe is writing in this continuous eighth note style. Sounds like this. Right, that's the deal. Now, let's follow along a little bit more, and this is why I included the second page of this. Let's go on into the last measure of page 7 and go into the first measure of page 8. You can look at Joe's melody, and the last measure of page 7, he's got an E and a D and a G and an F sharp, and then going into page 8, you've got a B on the melody on the word dreams, and then an A going down to a D, going up to an E, and then bright with promises, G, F sharp, D, E. Okay? Now, take a look at how he orchestrated his piano part, right, to fit around that. If you look at the right hand of the piano starting in the last measure of page 7, you'll see that all of those melodic notes are there. Okay, every one of them are there. But what he's doing is on the offbeats, on the upbeats, he's filling in with either passing tones or with either, jumps down to corresponding chord tone members. For instance, the last measure of page 7, the melody is an E, and And then on the end of one, he's moving down to A. Well, this is a D major chord in this measure right here. So A is part of the chord. And then he's got a D in the melody. That's on beat 2. And then he puts in kind of, it's not really a passing tone, but a little E just to kind of fill in the space on the end of 2. And then he jumps up and hits the melody on G. And then and of 3 is a D. And then F sharp, a melody note, is on 4. And then the and of 4 is a D. And then he keeps that same thing going into the top measures of page 8. So if I play the piano part again, you're going to hear the melody all the way through. I'll start at the last measure of page 7. Right? Now, there's some cool things there in how we accompany. Let's kind of take it out of this and put it in, what about What a Friend We Have in Jesus? Okay? If I were going to accompany a congregation singing this and I had my bass and my drums with me, I could do something like this. Right? Did you hear what I did there? Right. The chords that I'm working with there are F major, right? That's the first chord of What a Friend We Have in Jesus. And then it moves on into the 4 chord, which is B flat major. That's the second chord of What a Friend We Have in Jesus. And when I was playing at that time, I was highlighting the melody note. But the truth is, I wouldn't really have to do this for that song. Everyone knows it. I might just do this. Right? And again, if I were accompanying that with a congregation and just me at the piano, that's such a familiar old hymn, they probably would be able to sing it okay without me necessarily, having to play every note of the melody. But certainly they would get it, if there was a rhythm section there. What would my left hand do if all that was going on with a bass? Again, I would be very sparse rather with my left hand. I might let them play. If you're going to play the root of the chord, I would not play it down low where it's going to be in the bass player range. I might play it up here. This is the F 5 steps below middle C. So I might do this. And then I might play for the B flat a whole step below middle C. So that gives my left hand a little something to do where it's not, just sitting there going, but at the same time, I'm staying out of the bass player's way. Again, by the way, a great way to practice these patterns, I'm going to tell you this one more time, is to take them through all the different keys. This is a bunny trail I'm going to chase. And so if you'll forgive me just for a couple of minutes, we're doing fine on time. But one of the best pieces of advice that I have ever heard, which really developed my ears and my ability to improvise, our choir director, who was, when I was growing up, was one of these guys, and he's still around. He's just an incredibly gifted musician. And he had piano degrees, piano performance degrees. He could play his Chopin. He could do all that. But he could play anything by ear. He didn't have perfect pitch. Tony didn't have perfect pitch. But he literally had such a sharp ear that by the time you played it on the radio, he would be sitting there. As soon as he found out what key it was in, he could be playing along with it. Just really, really tremendous ears. I don't have perfect pitch. And when I was a kid, I didn't play by ear all that well. And I really wanted to learn how to do that. And Tony told me, he said, this is what you need to do. He said, Brad, take a hymn book and take one hymn per week. Now think about how many hymns are in the hymn book, right? I mean, this is, 400 hymns in the hymn book. You could be doing this for years. But he said, take one hymn per week. Just start on at the very beginning, right at the first, where the holy holies are and the praise to the Lord the Almighty, those opening hymns, and learn it in all 12 keys. Take one hymn per week and not just kind of sort of maybe play it, but absolutely master it in all 12 keys. Take a week to do it. And then the week after that, go and grab another hymn. And I thought, yeah. That sounds like a great idea. I'm going to do that. So I started doing it. And I have to admit, I got through about 4 hymns and then I got burnt out and said, this is for the birds. But in the process of doing those 3 or 4 hymns that I did, it opened up my ears like crazy. It got me so much more fluid in playing in all sorts of different keys, ones that are comfortable. Jazz musicians always love to say there's no such thing as difficult keys, just unfamiliar ones. And to sit there and play "To God Be the Glory" in the key of F sharp major, or in the key of B major or C flat, however you want to read it, it can stretch you a little bit. But then the other thing that it started doing was it really developed my ears, because if I were going to take "To God Be the Glory," and okay, it's usually written in the key of G major. Some hymn books have it in A flat. But I would start playing it through G, then A flat, then up into A, then up into B flat. And first, it would be really difficult. I'd be sitting here trying to think through this. But then by the time I would get through about 5 or 6 keys, something magical really happened. My ears started clicking in. And all of a sudden, my ears started kind of helping me know where to go. And so nowadays, I do play by ear pretty well. And I don't know if I do as well as my old music director did. But I'm absolutely convinced that part of the reason for that is that I started transposing things early. Bunny trail over. But if you wanted to learn to do this, take a worship song, take a simple hymn like "What a Friend We Have in Jesus," and just sit there and arpeggiate through it. And then when you're done with that, do it in the key of F sharp. It's usually in the key of F. So move it to F sharp. That's F sharp going to B. And then you move it to the key of G. Right? And you just get comfortable doing that in all the different keys. It's just tremendous benefit to you. The next style that I have on here is chordal style. Okay, and I'm thinking of this both without a rhythm section, without a bass and drums, and with bass and drums. Okay. Now, if you, again, I'll throw this caveat out there again one more time. If you are playing with bass and drums, you want to minimize that left hand because you don't want to get in the way of what your bass player is doing. I've told you now a couple times I started out life as a jazz pianist, right? And that's why jazz pianists, if I were going to play, All of Me or something like that, and I was playing with bass and drums, what my left hand would be doing would be playing something like this. And here's my melody. Right, and if I were taking some kind of improvisation, right, I'm playing these sparse chords in the left hand because I know that my bass player is doing all this, and I don't want to get in his way. So it's the same principle here. If you're not without a bass player, then again, let that left hand rock and roll. But I have found so often that for church pianists moving into a praise and worship setting, it's so hard to not play everything in the left hand that you want to play. So take a look at bar 21. Here, back to this now. This is what I mean by chordal style. There's a couple of different ways you can play chords, okay? You can just play this, right? I mean, really just, plain simple chords. Let's go back to "What a Friend We Have in Jesus," since that seems to be the tune of the day that I've been working with. I could just play this. Right? That's a very contemporary kind of a pop sound. But if I wanted to be a little bit more creative, I could do what we call broken chords. And that's what Joe does in this. This is another Joe Martin piece. And that's why I included this in here. If you look at bar 21, okay, Lord, you are the vine, that's bar 21. Here's what his accompaniment sounds like. Right? We only need to go that far. It's just the concept of it I want you to see. He could have played, and later on in the piece, he probably does just put all this together as big blocks. He could have done that. It would have been fine. But instead, he kind of breaks it up a little bit, right? So that's kind of cool. So back to what a friend we have in Jesus. What if I accompanied it like this? What a friend we have in Jesus. All our sins and griefs to bear. Right. That's kind of nice. And I tell you what, a great way of practicing this would be to take, any major chord. Let's take F major for a minute. So I've got I know you can't see my keyboard, but my right hand thumb is playing F, and my second finger is playing A, third finger is playing C, and my fifth finger is playing F. So what I'm going to do is just break that up. I'm going to play the A and the F together. Sounds like the Entertainer, right? So I'm going to play the A and the F together, and then I'm going to play the low F and the C together, and I alternate. Well, what I would do at this point is take that up to F sharp major, and then G, A flat, A, B, B flat, B, C, D flat, D, E flat, E, and then you're back to F. Now, of course, after you've done that, to be thorough, you would probably want to change it to F minor. Change that A to an A flat, and then do the same thing again. And take those minor things all the way through, right? You could make it an augmented chord. You could make your right hand block be playing F, A, C sharp, and F. And then take that one all the way through. Or maybe it's a diminished chord. Right? I'm a big believer in taking things through every key. You can probably see that. A lot of that comes from my jazz training. When we would learn little jazz lines, we would say, okay, here's a jazz riff. Okay, I just made that up. So now then I would play it here. Right, and then take it, through all the different keys. It's really, really helpful to do. On page 11, which has Come Worship God, actually, there's nothing necessarily on page 11 I care for you to see about. I just put that there as a placeholder, the title. What I really want you to see is on page 12, okay, which is another iteration of this chordal style of playing. This is a little bit more traditional, style of chordal playing. We can see what Joe does here. This is bar 84. I've just played through most of the page. Well, obviously, that's a very, these are fast eighth notes, but you could accompany it as slow quarter notes if you had to, depending on the tempo of the piece that you were doing. The other thing that I'd point out about this as I'm studying the score, and this is kind of interesting, and it's something you can do in your keyboard accompanying too, is if you look at bar 84, you'll see that although he's not necessarily making the melody note the top note of every one of his chords, for instance, on the downbeat of 84, the melody is a C, but the top note of his chord is an A. But then on beats 3 and 4, he does move the chord up to E, A, and C, and then on beat 4, he moves the top note down to a B. And so, in other words, he is more often than not, although he's not gluing himself into this, more often than not, he is letting the top note of his chords be the melody note. Okay, so if we were going to take Amazing Grace, right? I'm picking easy stuff here just because I know it's things that we all know. So I know that sounds probably a little dopey, but I'm just demonstrating that what I'm doing is playing these chords. What's the word I'm looking for? With the melody note on top. I also I'm giving out a lot of practice techniques today, and I know that for some of you most of this is going to be old hat, but if there are any in here that have never done this before, do make sure that you're comfortable with all, particularly in rhythm section playing and accompanying, that you're comfortable with your chords and all of their inversions. And I bet most of you probably are. But you really gotta make sure that, oh my gosh, it's A major chord. Yes, I can play it in every inversion that you need. A diminished, A augmented, whatever the case may be. Next up on page 13 is what I call a gospel shuffle style. This is one of my choral pieces, came out a few years ago, called The New City of Joy. It kind of has a little bit of a, I hate to say this, but it really does. It's got a Fats Domino style. I say I hate to say it because Fats Domino, is rock and roll, but hey, you know what? It's awesome stuff. And so I incorporated it a little bit into this piece, which kind of has some of those elements there. I'm a big Fats Domino fan. And so this is a big pattern that he would use. You can see it at measure 5. It's really called the shuffle pattern. And when you listen to Fats on some of his old recordings, Blueberry Hill or Margie, whatever the case may be, a lot of times he'll be doing this kind of a feel. Sorry, let me do it again. So it really is similar to the pa pa that we talked about earlier, but there's a difference. Number one, it's swung, right? And typically Southern gospel pieces are not swung, right? They're usually what we call straight eighth notes. So a Southern gospel would be, more 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and just really straight down the pocket. And a shuffle is usually swung. The other thing is, which makes a shuffle rhythm unique, is that what happens in your bass line. You can look on page or measure 5, and you see that on beat 3, it's not only one bass note on beat 3, but it's 2 bass notes on beat 3. 1, 2. So if I were to put that into a major key with there's within my heart a melody. You all know that one. He keeps me singing. I might do something like this. You hear that bass line. Again, if you're just accompanying the congregation that way, with no instruments with you, you're in good shape. If you have the bass player there, you want to make sure you stay out of his way. And so I probably would just be doing the right hand 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That kind of a deal. Kind of fun stuff. And that shuffle rhythm in this one carries on into the next page of it. It looks like. 13. Bop, 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 bop. Haven't seen that piece in a while. Now, the next little rhythmic style that, or accompanying style that I want to talk to you about is what I call rhythmic gospel style. Now, I don't know if that's a very professional, scientific name for it or not. And I wanted to show this to you just in the context of a choral piece from some accompaniments that really do represent that style really, really well. A lot of times when I'm accompanying in more of a gospel style, how do I explain this? What's the best way to explain this? If you take a look at bar 7, a lot of times gospel harmonies move in the right hand in what we call second inversion chords. Okay, so if you look at bar 7, you'll see that the right hand, it's an E flat major chord, but it's in second inversion. Okay, and then it does move up to the A flat, which is in first inversion. Then it moves to a B flat, which is in root position. But that second inversion E flat is what is so typical of gospel style. If I were going to play with a real gospel groove, I might do something like, let's see. That kind of a deal. And what I'm doing is taking that second inversion chord, and then I'm moving it right up to an F minor chord in second inversion, C, F, and A flat, and then an E flat 7 chord with the 7th in the bass, D flat, G, and B flat, and then moving it right back down to F minor in second inversion, then E flat in second inversion. That's so characteristic of that style. And that's what Stacy's arrangement here of this piece really demonstrates so well. If I look at that right hand, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I tell you what, in learning something like this, to get familiar with that language of those chords, I would take a couple of bars of something like this or anything else, and here, put it into E. Sorry, I messed up. Right, and then put it into F. And then F sharp, right, and get comfortable with those chords. You'll see that rhythmically they duplicate the melody. Okay, they're really moving in lockstep with the melody. And, if we were accompanying something with a rhythm section, that would be very characteristic, or certainly even, without a rhythm section. I'm moving ahead in the piece to see if there's anything else in there that might be stylistically appropriate. Here's bar 13. If you look at bar 15, I'm glad I looked at the second page. That's what I'm talking about, those second inversion chords. If you look at the right hand of bar 15, you've got F minor, but the right hand's voiced in a second inversion. And then the right hand moves on down to E flat, right, second inversion. Then A flat, or an F minor chord with A flat in the bass, that's first inversion. And then it finishes up. Right, that's what I mean. Okay. Now we are on the home stretch. So contemporary singer-songwriter. This is a ballad style. Okay. And I included in this Heather's gorgeous ballad, Let Me Walk You Home. If you don't know this one, go out and buy it immediately. Just don't even ask any questions. Just go do it. If you eyeball this, okay, and obviously this is a style that You probably more often than not will be playing with a rhythm section, or if you're not playing with a rhythm section, it would be something that you're probably playing with a soloist, maybe a vocal soloist. This is not necessarily something that you would do congregationally. Now, here's why. Let me explain that. I mean, I guess you could, but in a lot of contemporary styles of accompanying, the melody is so rhythmically busy. Okay. Um, and this melody is, it's a slow song, it's a ballad, it's quarter note equals 62, so it's not fast. But if you start at measure 6 and you just look at Heather's vocal melody, look how busy it is. There's 16th notes and 8th notes and, ties and just all sorts of stuff going on. Well, when you've got a melody that is that busy, and a lot of contemporary Christian is that way, even if it's not necessarily fast, it's just got rhythmic subtleties to the melody. You really don't want to do a whole lot of accompanying that's going to get in the way of the melody. Okay. And, the one thing Heather did not do, which would have been wrong to do, is to make her accompaniment like this. And try to play the tune with no, 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 no. What she does is the soloist is singing, and she's giving the soloist a lot of space. Right here, look at this. Half notes. Right, then that takes us into page 18. Then half notes. Right. And that, I think, is very indicative of this style, particularly this ballad style. And so if you're accompanying, a worship song, and the truth is, I said a minute ago, this really wasn't something you do with a congregation. No, the truth is you really could. If you, were accompanying Lauren Daigle's Rescue, or I'm trying to think of another one. What's the song? Love Like This. What did I do to deserve love like this? We do it at our church a good bit. Jesus Strong and Kind by City of Light. When I'm accompanying that kind of thing on Sunday mornings with our guys playing with me, a lot of times I really am. I've got my worship team up there. They're singing the song. They're leading, and I'm just kind of doing this kind of stuff. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. I'm given a lot of space, right, on these ballads because it's so indicative of the style. The other thing that is indicative of the style is added tones, right? The old joke is that nowadays you can't have contemporary Christian without the added second to a major chord, right? You know what I mean? Like if you've got a major chord, it's just not Christian unless you put this is a C chord, you got to put the D in there. And then all of a sudden you get you a gospel chord. I don't know if that's true or not, but if you take a look at what Heather has done here, like go back to measure 6. Beat 2 is a D major chord, but she's got the E in there, and that's a nice little color tone. Beat 3 is an E minor chord. Beat 4 is back to a D chord, but she's kept the E in there. Then the downbeat of 7 is a G chord, and she added the A, which is the second. You're always good to add seconds and things like that with all this kind of stuff. It really is so appropriate to the style and just creating a lot of different space. So then number 9, we have two more. This is a composition of mine that premiered virtually with Jason Tram and the Ocean Grove Choir. I've wanted to go to Ocean Grove forever and ever, and finally, back 2 years ago, they commissioned a piece from me and had me write it, and I was going to go up there and direct it, and then, of course, the world fell apart with COVID, and so I wasn't able to go, but they did a great job doing it virtually, and one of these years, I hope to get up there and go. What I want to show you about or show you on this one is what I call motor rhythm, and you can see it at 9. You might look at it and think, well, that's kind of the chordal style that you've already talked about, and to a certain extent it is. But there's something so intense and so I don't know the word. I'll stick with intense about this motor rhythm concept. It sounds like this. Right? You've heard that kind of thing before. I have noticed through the years playing with my praise team, and what would have made this session probably more helpful is if I had come in and had a list of like here's this worship song from Hillsong that has, you can use this kind of accompaniment on it. But there are moments in my worship team playing over the past couple of years where I've used this to really great effect. Now this is in 6/8. Doesn't have to be in 6/8. No, actually, this is in 4/4. It's in 4/4. I'm sorry. I saw the 6/8 up there in the middle of the page, but it switches to 4/4 at bar 7. Usually these motor rhythms are played in the middle of the piano because that's the place where they have the most bite. You know, if you play it up high, it starts to sound like, I don't know, Christmas time or something. But if you play it here in the middle register of the piano, whatever the chord might be, right, then it kind of cuts through a little bit. Again, if I were playing that with a bass player, my left hand, he would just kind of have to maybe, you know, find a little note in there around that octave below middle C, but don't be doing too much because you'll get your bass player's way. Then lastly, with 3.5 minutes left, we've timed this really, really well. A lot of contemporary, well, I don't know if I'd call it all contemporary Christian, but a lot of, well, yeah, it is contemporary. It's coming from people like the Gettys and Stuart Townend and you know, all those kind of folks, City of Light. And a lot of times we're seeing music more and more that's in 6/8, right? Across the Lands, for instance, if you know that Getty song, I believe that's in 6/8. I did an arrangement of that one for Shawnee Press years ago. And so 6/8 is just ready-made for the pianist to come up with all sorts of little cool patterns. 6/8, as you know, has 6 small beats in the measure, but really it has 2 big beats, 2 macro beats, right? We don't think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What we think is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 1, 2. And that's how we typically think of 6/8. Well, look at what I do. Well, I didn't arrange this. This is Diane Hannibal and Doug Nolan. But look what they do at bar 6. Bar 6. Here's your rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then if I put the left hand with it, bar 8. Let's go ahead and scroll on to the next page and see if anything changes. Yeah, let's look at bar 13. This is on the last page of your handout. Sounds like this. So you hear that? Right? It is so possible to devise and come up with all, I mean, it's just almost an infinite amount of patterns when you're in 6/8. That first one that we were looking at, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It could be this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It could be this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It could be this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, it's just all these little deviations of it. And you know, when you're playing with the band and you're in 6/8 and the bass player's playing and the guitarist is playing, it's a really cool sound to sit there and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1. Right, and be kind of doing these little 6/8 fills. They're all derived from arpeggios, right? They're all coming from, you know, in this case C major. Or you know, whatever. It's all diatonic to the key that you're in, but it, because of the division of 6/8 into 2 big beats, it just kind of rhythmically allows you to come up with any kind of cool pattern. So, all right, we have gotten through this with 17 seconds left. I am going to move to my chat bar. Oh, yes, Ruth, kinetic memory also helps me find my place in a particular key. Yep. I didn't see that. I'm sorry. I had my chat turned off. Does anyone else have any questions or comments? We are done with our time, but I'm happy to stay just for a couple of minutes if anyone has any questions. I hope this has been helpful to you. Church pianists are really kind of moving into a brave new world now, and we've been moving there for some time. Because we don't play alone anymore. We're having to figure out our spot in the context of playing with bass players and guitarists, and we're having to find our spot. Typically, if you really think about it, pianists and piano, unless you're Elton John or Billy Joel, piano is not really found that often in rock bands. I mean, rock is guitar driven. It's bass guitar driven. It's drum driven. It's lead guitar driven. In fact, Billy Joel and Elton John are the only two pianists that I can think of in rock and roll that, really have made a name for themselves. I know back in the 50s, you heard the piano there with like At the Hop, Jerry Lee Lewis, Danny and the Juniors, all that kind of stuff. But as time has went on, piano has kind of been minimized in the context of rock bands. Now, what that means, though, is a praise and worship band, I mean, it kind of functions like a rock band. And so it's very guitar driven, it's very drum driven, and we kind of have to find our place in that, where we can continue to do what we've been doing without getting in their way and adding to the texture rather than distracting. So I haven't seen any other questions come in. I hope that this has been helpful for you. And I certainly hope that we'll all be together soon, maybe in person at the next Alleluia. And with that, I will wish everyone a great afternoon, folks. Thanks for joining me so much. Blessings on all of you.